guess since we've reached the last chapter of this Cora Jakes, Richard Brandon Coleman storybook, that this would be a good time to actually close the church house courthouse case entitled The State of Texas versus Richard Brandon Coleman. And so I'm going to talk about where we are now today in this case, now that Brandon Coleman has entered into a plea agreement, and where is he now and what will happen to him next. Hi there, I'm Professor Blackmore, and welcome back to my channel and to my podcast series entitled Pedo-Files, Pedo-Files. And as you know, the husband of BishopTDJakes' daughter, Cora Jakes, i.e. Brandon Coleman, was accused of carrying out various child sexual abuse acts as alleged by his and Cora's 13-year-old adopted daughter and incorporated after the convening of an Ellis County, Texas grand jury in this 5-count indictment, wherein Brandon Coleman was accused of touching the child's private areas. Now, in my opinion, the state's case had serious problems, and in prior episodes of this podcast, I laid out my theory about this wholly defective count 1, which somewhat also laid the foundation for counts 2 through 5 of the indictment. But in essence, I just didn't believe that Ellis County had proper jurisdiction over this case, because if Ellis County is the proper county, it means that this couple had this child in their home for over 10 years, and Brandon Coleman waited to commit these alleged acts of touching the private areas of the child for the very first time in the over 10-year period of time on only 2 days within a 21-day span of time on July the 28th, 2021 and August 11, 2021. And I just don't believe that. I just don't believe that over 10 years passed and all of a sudden when they moved to a new house in Ellis County for a period of 21 days, on 2 days, he decides he's going to touch the child. I personally don't believe that. But as I have covered in prior episodes of this podcast, Brandon Coleman and Cora Jakes only closed on their brand new home in Ellis County on July the 25th, 2021. But they had lived in Dallas and Tarrant counties with this child for longer periods of time. And so I'm not saying that I believe that Brandon Coleman is innocent or guilty. I have no idea. But in my opinion, either he had been molesting the child for over a longer period of time, or he had not molested the child at all. And if he had been molesting a child for over a longer period of time, I just feel that either Dallas County or Tarrant County would have been the proper counties to assert jurisdiction over this case. But it seems that these counties, Dallas County, where the Potter's House Church is located, and Tarrant County, where the TD Jakes compound is located, seem to be just a little bit too close for comfort, because neither of the law enforcement officials nor the news media in these counties wanted to touch this case with a 10-foot pole. Now, in addition to my belief that Ellis County's jurisdiction was lacking, I could not see how the state could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Brandon Coleman touched the child, because the state's own subpoena to Cook Children's Hospital revealed that the first time the child had been physically examined was on October the 6th, 2021. And so I just cannot see how they would have had any actual DNA to prove up the allegations. And this case would have virtually, on those assumptions, have been based solely on the child's word against Brandon Coleman's word, which would have required the state to put the child on the stand to give actual testimony at the time of trial. And so my personal opinion was that the case was weak for those two reasons: jurisdiction and a lack of physical evidence to prove up the required elements of the allegations beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, Brandon Coleman seemed to profusely assert his innocence to these charges. And since he was never able to secure the financial resources to obtain a bail bond, he had been sitting in the Ellis County Jail for over 545 days, and the jury trial was imminently set to begin within a few weeks with jury selection. Notwithstanding, however, after serving over 545 days in jail, Brandon Coleman entered into a plea agreement, pleading guilty to counts 2 and 5 of the indictment, and the plea agreement was entered into the court record on October the 23rd, 2023. Not surprisingly though, the state agreed to dismiss counts 1, 3, and 4. And I'm not surprised because I think the state knew it had jurisdictional issues, and I know they knew their case would have been based on circumstantial evidence because they had no direct evidence to establish that the man touched the child other than putting the child on the stand, which I don't think they were ready to do. But that is all water under the bridge, ladies and gentlemen, because by signing the plea agreements, Brandon Coleman has forfeited any opportunity he would have had to an appeal of this case. And so, what now? Well, as I informed you in my last podcast episode update of this case, although all of the other jury trial setting dates had been removed from the court's docket, the October 31st, 2023 setting remained on the court's calendar. And as I informed you at that time, I thought that this setting remained on the court's calendar so that the court could do what has been the normal and customary manner of entering a plea into the record of the court, and that is on the record in open court in the presence of a court reporter so that the judge could give all of the proper admonishments to the defendant on the record, properly informing Brandon Coleman of the gravity of entering to such a plea agreement would have on his state and federal constitutional rights. But it appears that did not happen. And so, after October 31st came and went, and after the setting had been removed from the court's docket calendar, on November the 6th, I emailed the court clerk stating, quote, "I am aware that the trial was taken off docket because of the plea agreement on file. At that time, it appeared that an October 31st setting was left on the docket, and after October 31st, it was removed. And so my question is, were any courtroom proceedings held in this case since October the 17th, 2023? And is there any way that I can order a copy of the docket sheet detailing all entries made by the judge?" End quote. And so later that day, the felony court clerk replied stating, quote, "It doesn't appear that any other proceedings were held." End quote. And although her words were short, she thankfully attached a copy of the court's full docket sheet, reflecting a record of each and every court hearing that has taken place in this case. And as you can see here, the last court hearing that took place was the October the 17th motion for continuance hearing that was denied. And although this list of documents entered here in the court's record reflects that they were entered on October the 23rd, I assure you, honey child, that these documents were not on this court docket on November the 6th when I sent my email to the court's clerk. And these documents definitely were not here on October the 31st, because if I had seen these documents here, I would have known that Brandon Coleman received these important admonishments that I mentioned in my prior episode. But now that these documents are here, they now show and reflect that you can see that the admonishments were made to Brandon Coleman, i.e. his ineligibility to possess a firearm or ammunition, and his rights regarding an appeal, of which I informed you in my prior episode he does not have any as a result of him signing the plea agreement in which he agreed to accept a term of imprisonment of 20 years for each of the 2 counts to which he pled guilty. Now, as you can see here, all of these documents that purport to have been entered in the court's record on October the 23rd are hidden from court view and are not accessible for public viewing. And the plea agreements note that a victim impact statement or statements were provided, and as you can see that they were entered here in the court registry of court documents. But because these documents are not accessible for public viewing, there is no way of knowing who provided the victim impact statements. In other words, whether they were provided by Cora Jakes or Brandon Coleman's adopted daughter, or if they were provided by even some other members of Cora Jakes' family, like her mother or whoever. I'm sure TD Jakes didn't provide an impact statement, but anyway. Now, the court electronic docket information has now changed to a disposition of conviction, guilty plea. In the case, additional details has been changed to reflect, quote, sentence type committed directly to prison and jail information, TDC, for 20 years, credit for 548 days, end quote. So this does give a slight clue on the answer to this question posed in the comment section of my prior podcast episode, in which my lovely guest asks, quote, I don't understand, 20 years or 40 years, end quote. Now, prior to receiving this new information posted here on the court's electronic docket, which information was not posted until after November the 6th, I replied to the comment by stating the following. The sentence is 20 years for each of the two counts. The term could be served consecutively, i.e. back to back, for a total of 40 years, or concurrently, i.e. at the same time, for a total of 20 years. And now, while I am assuming that it is concurrently, I have no way of knowing because it is not stated in the plea agreement. But now that we have this new information posted on the court's electronic docket, I can kind of see that the term will be served concurrently, meaning he'll serve both 20-year terms at the same time. Because again, it states, quote, sentence type committed directly to prison, jail information, TDC, for 20 years, and he gets credit for 548 days, end quote. But as you can see here, as of November the 16th, 2023, Brandon Coleman remains in custody at the Ellis County Jail, and he has not yet been transferred to TDC to serve his 20-year conviction, and his Ellis County Jail record information has been changed to reflect the court conviction disposition for each count, actually reflecting that he served 561 days as of November the 16th, 2023. But this time will start to accumulate on his 20-year conviction term. And so, ladies and gentlemen of this courthouse jury, how long do you think Brandon Coleman will remain in Ellis County Jail before he's transferred to the big house? And do you think justice has been served? I mean, do you really think Brandon Coleman would have signed the plea agreement when he was so close to having his day in court if he really was innocent? Please let me know by leaving your comments in the comments section below. And I hope you'll also give me a big thumbs up. And I hope you'll also consider donating to this video and my entire channel ministry by donating to the Professor Blackmore Cash App. And I hope you'll also subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell so you'll be notified whenever I come back with more hot tea from the church house, the courthouse, and everywhere else, honey child. And please also follow me on TikTok and Instagram.